Girl, you have got to try this Laneige lip mask. Trust me, my lips needed that love.
Love these vanilla vibes from Kayali. That top note is just so smooth.
Smooth and stunning. That's what you get with this K18 hair mask.
Those brands everybody's talking about, they're at Sephora. Discover the hype with the hottest names in beauty, including Laneige, Kayali, K18, and Rare Beauty. Only at Sephora.
So I've been hearing a lot of how hard it is to make adult relationships work. Adult friendships, I hear a lot, how hard it is to make adult friendships work, but also how dating is hard. And I think I might have an answer for you. So stay tuned. So how many times have you heard someone say or yourself say that it's difficult to have adult relationships, adult friendships specifically? Yeah, I've heard people say that it's hard to date as an adult. And I think it might be, well, there's a few things I've realized. First of all, I think one of the reasons why it's so hard to have adult friendships, and I might have talked about this, is that we don't necessarily know how to be adults in our friendships. Okay. A lot of what is discussed or what is perceived as friendship in reality is convenience based. And a lot of what may not be there is actual intimacy and connection that's required to sustain friendships. And a lot of people may not readily admit, but it's like we don't necessarily desire the responsibility that comes with friendship. It's not a desire. It's really not, because it does take work. I think a lot of times the concept of friendship is cool, right? It's a convenient thing. It's always supposed to be, oh yeah, when I want to have a good time, or when I'm doing bad specifically, I can reach out to this friend or whatever. It's a tool. It's a tool in my toolbox that I reach for when I need it. But the idea of this is a connection that requires emotional output, as well as input, may not always work. And, there are a lot of things we put in front of us too of, well, I have a family, or, I'm in a relationship, or I gotta work. And these things they're not things that we necessarily were born with. These are things that we acquire over time, and also things that we choose to cultivate, right? But I think to say that out loud may not always be the most appealing, or the most what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't present, right? It doesn't make us look the best. I think a lot of things in our lives require a self-image focus, right? A lot of times we may desire to look a certain way. And adult relationships are effort. Honestly, they are. These connections in life don't just happen. But I think what's also cool is to hear how many people in the world are having the same issue, right? There's a common issue that's happening. It's kind of like an epidemic at this point. It's taking place. A lot of people are experiencing it, but it's the constant discussion with no real plan of action, right? Have you guys noticed that? Like, there's no real plan of action. I hear people say, yeah, it's really hard making adult friendships. I moved into this new city. everybody already seems to have their own cliques, or everybody's kind of doing their own thing, or no one has time to build friendship, whatever. However, the dating apps are booming, right? Dating apps are booming. You'll hear the same complaints there, right? People will say, yeah, I've given up on dating, or it's so hard to date because this city is superficial, or, everybody's looking for hookups, whatever the case may be. However, you'll realize that there's still a certain level of effort and determination put into finding a partner. And you may ask, well, why is that? There could be a couple of things. First of all, there is usually instant gratification that you receive in a romantic partnership. In a lot of ways, it could be the sexual thing, right? A sexual return on investment. There is some level of physical intimacy that you receive and you have access to. With a friendship, it may not always be that element that's there, or at all, because it's your friend, right? So therefore, a lot of people may see friendships as, well, what do I get out of it? What do I get out of it when I don't need anything from it? Okay. And that's a very interesting way to think about it. I think what I hear too is there is this desire to be perceived as more important, right? So a lot of times we are telling other people how busy we are, how much work we have to do, how late we stayed up crunching numbers and doing all this stuff. And mind you, somebody else may be just as busy. They may be struggling with a little bit more. They just don't talk about it as much. So there is this desire to be perceived as more important too. Truth of the matter is that there is a big fear base around deep connection. And people are finally starting to realize that friendship requires deep connection. And on some level, people are also realizing that they don't have the capacity for deep connection, nor do they desire it. They may look for the pieces or the elements that take care of them. However, going any deeper than that, they're not really for it. Okay. And it's not about bad or good, like who's a bad person, who's a good person. I think it's just the awareness of functionality, right? And we were kind of sold on this idea, I think, in a lot of ways, that friendship is not an important relationship. However, what is starting to be noticed is that a lot of people are stressed out. A lot of people feel very alone. A lot of people feel very isolated. Okay, a lot of people are going through life with, they have a significant other. However, they still feel voided, right? Like they don't have the capacity of community because they gave all of that up for a romantic partner, so to speak. If you look at the friendships that you had in elementary school, or you look at the friendships that you had in even high school, and if you are still friends with those people, ask yourself, what's still keeping us as friends? What values do we share? Right? And if you're no longer friends with those people, think about some of the closest relationships you had during that time. What was the common thread? A lot of times it is proximity, right? Because I'm so close to these people physically, we're in the same classes, we have recess together, or we live down the street from one another. Like our time spent with one another is a little bit more constant. So therefore, there's no real need to try harder. Okay, as adults, we move around. We do have kids, we develop families, we get into romantic relationships. And while we make room for those things in our lives, right? When you have a child, you make room for that. When you decide to start building a deeper relationship with a partner, you make room for that. You make space for it. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You naturally just make space for it. When it comes to friendship, that's not always the case. It's like if you fit, you have a space, but if you don't, I'm not making room for you. Okay. Priorities shift. That's a big thing. Priorities shift as we get older, not as we necessarily mature, but just simply as we get older, priorities may shift. But I think that's a good thing too, because as your priorities shift, you get to learn what your principles are, right? As I get older, as I go through life, what matters to me more than it used to? Okay. What matters to me more than it used to? I've actually gotten back in touch with some people, like I can sincerely call them friends, that I haven't, like when we were younger, we weren't as close, but we weren't, distant. We were acquaintances, for lack of a better word. And now in this season of life, it's become very clear that our moral compass kind of aligns, our value system aligns, and the connection is so easy, and we're not around each other, right? Haven't seen each other in almost 20 years. We don't live in the same state. We're not down the street. We're not even in the same time zone. However, the effort to connect is there. And truth be told, the benefit or the incentive from that relationship is nothing more than the fact of like, oh, this person I care about.
Build a routine with Ollie that supports your wellness needs, like getting your daily vitamins and minerals with Ollie's multi-gummies, or keeping your mood upbeat with all the vitamin D in Hello Happy. Give your gut health some support with probiotics, and wake up feeling refreshed after taking Ollie Sleep. Do wellness on your terms. Find Ollie at a Walmart or Target near you or at ollie.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Right? I care about them and I value my connection with them. And if you can genuinely look at your relationships and ask yourself, what do I get from this? Right? But also, what do I give to it? I hear a lot of people talk about partnerships and what they look for in a partner, but I very rarely hear people say what they are willing to show up with in a partnership. They have these standards. They have a list of expectations of what this person should look like, what they should do, how healthy they should be, what their background should be, all these things. But it's like, okay, how do you support this person? How do you think you'll complement their life? And that's never a discussion. And I think the same thing happens with friendship. A lot of what I hear around friendship is this demand that other people should be understanding that we are not making room for them in our lives. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about this concept of, flaky friends, the person you make plans with and then they flake last minute, and how that's become so okay in today's society. Like I've heard so many times, and it makes me wince a little bit, but people will be like, if you don't want to go somewhere, you don't have to go. Right. If you decide to wake up and you had plans with a person and you want to cancel, you can. But people don't finish that sentence. It's like, yes, you can do that. You have agency over your own choices. However, if that's how you continue to move in your relationship where you are flaky, you are inconsistent, you are telling this other person, hey, you cannot trust me. You cannot rely on me. I am not dependable. I am not considerate of you. Also, I don't prioritize this relationship. So while I'm making a choice about this relationship, you have the right to do the same about me. And that's where people fail to realize that just as much as they have choice to decide how they're going to treat a relationship, the other person also has that same choice. And there are different ways to betray a person. It's not just about telling their dark secrets. You could betray a person when they realize you're inconsistent. Or if you're constantly flaking on a person, they can realize, hey, I can't trust you to show up. And also I feel like it's too much for you to show up for me, or that this relationship is too much for you. So therefore, I'm going to stop inviting you into my life. And people don't like that. That's the funny thing about our adult connections that we don't understand. Is like you cannot operate like a child with other adults and still expect them to treat you with kid gloves behind that, because everybody has something to do. Everybody has something to do. And you are not the most important person in somebody else's world. There may be people who make effort to treat you that way, like you are important. And I think sometimes we may take advantage of that or overlook that effort. as busy as this world is and as isolated and hyper individualistic as we are as a society, we forget that people can be doing other things with their time. So to think that just because a person is always there, they're going to be, is a little entitled, right? We are only too busy for things that we are not making time for. Priorities are organized choices is my favorite statement. And I think what's also happening is that there are a lot of people moving throughout this world very wounded, and they show up to new relationships with that same wound, right? There are some people who are like, okay, I've been taught to not have expectations because in my previous relationships, people were just flaky, or, you know, we weren't really friends, we just hung out. So now I come with that energy and I'm very discarding or inconsiderate of other people who may not feel that way, right? I'm a flaky person and I know I am, and I think everybody else should be cool with that. However, the person on the receptive end may not be all right with that. They may not be a flaky individual and they may take that very personally. You know, we can't tell other people how to feel about our actions and our behavior. However, we do get to decide how we attribute to how they feel. Okay. There's a lot of negligence, I think, and even abuse in a lot of ways that exists in our friendships too, that not everybody talks about because people don't necessarily hear that being a conversation as often. There aren't any rules for friendship. There aren't any standards really. But what I love is that because this is becoming such a topic of discussion a little bit more often, is that people are now having the conversation on the other side, you know, advocacy. You know, I think as an adult, the best way that you can have adult friendships is to take a look at how much you have matured since you were a kid. Okay. What seems to be the same for you? What has changed? And I'm not talking about the fact that you now have to go to a job at a 9 to 5. No, because even that was a choice. You didn't always have that job. You chose it. And if somebody says, well, yeah, you know, I got to pay bills. Yeah, that's fine. Why is the friendship the collateral though? Because you're willing to make room for a partnership, right? It's like, well, I could build a life with a partner. Yeah, but that's a choice. And not every person you choose as a partner is everybody you stay with as a partner. So you were still willing to take a chance on that individual, right? One of the most important questions is to ask yourself, what do I value in my relationships as an adult? What do I align with in terms of my values in my relationships as an adult? What relationships are based on history? What relationships are based on health? Okay. What connections are maintained through intentional effort and consistency? What connections may be kind of lopsided? You know, where do I find myself saying I'm too busy? Have I realized there has been a certain either disconnect or distance in certain relationships? Okay. Who are my friends? Why do I call them friends? And what am I choosing them based on? I think even nowadays with technology, it's funny because social media is not that social. There is this narrative around like, friends online that don't support you, right? They watch everything that you do, but they don't engage, they don't interact, they don't support anything that you do, but they'll readily support a stranger or a celebrity. And you have two sides of that, right? You have certain people that align with that. You have other people that say, well, yeah, social media is not that deep. It's not real. But truth be told, there is some truth to that. You know, social media is a space that we all personally curate to watch and see what it is that we enjoy or that we want to consume. So if somebody's constantly consuming another person's content, who they're friends with or they consider themselves friends to be, and they don't support them, it's like, well, why is that? Why do I continue to support a relationship that I'm not supported in? Why is it my obligation to do that, to save face? Right? There's all these unspoken rules about how friendships should navigate, and very rarely is respect and consideration a part of it. Very rare. It's more about an entitlement to being on a receptive end of good behavior, despite our poor behavior. And again, when you have a society constantly moving like that, the checks and balances are always blurred. Right? The double standards are very much there. And again, you realize a lot of adults are not having adult relationships because they haven't matured enough to have those relationships. And a lot of people don't want that deep of connections. And if I do get that deep of a connection, I want it on my terms, right? I don't want to work for it. I don't want to offer anything to it. And it's conversations I've had with certain people where it's like, when they are not in need, they don't need the connection. It's almost like a subscription. I don't want to, now that the free trial is over, I'm not really eager to sustain this subscription. But we have to realize that there's another person on the other side of the relationship that we are engaging in. And I think once we understand that, we could better recognize what exactly is it that requires our attention in our adult friendships. And if you are an adult and you're having a hard time making adult friends, I want you to ask yourself, what am I looking for? Like, what do I desire for my adult friendships? Look at communication. How often does that need to happen for you? Look at effort to see each other. How often does that need to happen for you? Look at emotional availability. How often how important is that for you? Even political views, right? I think that's been a big thing too, that not everybody's really talking about, but is very much there. Politics can definitely be a integral part of how friendships work. That could be a big thing. That can be a huge thing. And even though it's unspoken, there are a lot of things that are still communicated in that process that we may not often talk about. So I think it's important for you to ask yourself, what is important for me in adult friendships? What does an adult friend mean? Okay. And don't just say all the good things of like, yeah, I'm down to be there whenever, actually understand what adult friendship looks like for you. Some people just want acquaintances. They won't say that, but they just want acquaintances, and you may have a lot of acquaintances or people that you're cool with or associates that you come across, but friendship might have a different level for you. And that's probably why it's hard. Or take a look at how you may exist in your friendships, right? How often do you self-sabotage? Who are you choosing as a friend? Okay. There are so many cool variables that go into having adult friendships. And I realize like the friendships that I have in my adult life, age-wise, they're very different. Like they're very expansive. Okay. But I realized the friendships that have lasted or that continue to last have some level of engagement in terms of moral values shared. Also consideration, a certain level of maturity, but also a certain level of participation. It is necessary. Otherwise, the friendship dies. It's simple. And no matter how much people try to argue that it's law. Like any relationship, friendship is no different. If you don't nurture it, it will not be present. Period. Right? So remember, adult friendships may not necessarily be hard. It just may be harder to make friends out of people who don't know how to be one. All right? So just think about that. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Take flight.